Well, here we are the next day. I went ahead and paused for the cause and thought about my next move. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just snip this out. And hopefully this time I'll be a lot more successful and not rip the pads off. So we'll see what happens there. I went ahead and removed the big capacitor out of here, the flash capacitor, in order to check all the components the best I can. And much to my surprise, I found this spot right here. As you can see, it's a little black. Looks like an electrical explosion or something happened there. I checked this resistor right here, and that resistor checks out fine. In fact, I've checked the entire board, and I have not been able to find really any issue. Now, that's not to say that there still isn't an issue for a few reasons. One, I don't have a schematic. I've searched the internet and I could not find a service manual for this camera, which is really not too unusual. So because of that, I really don't know any of the values I'm looking at with all the SMDs. So the only thing I'm able to do is go through, check for shorts, see if I have any components that is not responding like they should. As far as the processors, the packages, again, since I really don't know what they are, what to expect, it's a cheap guess that they even work. Now, honestly, I did not pull the number off of them and punch that up on the internet to see what any of these packages do. The big ones would be a lot more easier to service or to test than these little guys right here. And you can see how tiny that is compared to this tiny screwdriver. And you can see how tiny that screwdriver is compared to my tiny thumb. And those that have worked with SMD know that these things can get tiny, like these even tinier components right next to it. So I did the best I could checking everything out for response. And as stated, on all the boards, they worked fine. The dark area, again, nothing in that area that would explain why that happened, as well as up underneath. I very seriously doubt this chip got that hot that it would make that spot on the other side, the opposing board, to give a black area, considering around this chip and surrounding chips, it's just fine. So, like the Bigfoot, it's a mystery that may never ever get solved. I also went ahead and looked at all the other boards. Same story. They all checked good, the best I could. Some of these components are so tiny that it was hard getting my probes down in there. And look at just how tiny these components are. Again, there's my small flathead. This reference crystal is extremely tiny. Slightly bigger than the blade of this small screwdriver. And then we got the trimmer for it, which is a little bigger. I went through this board and I tried to, just for the heck of it, test these switches on volt-ohms meter. And I had dickens of a time trying to do just that. In fact, I was unsuccessful. So I will take it that they work. That's the only way I'm going to be able to proceed with that, is that they work. One thing I will try to do, and I say try, is I will try to clean these switches all up, shoot a little electrical contact cleaner. They're pretty much a sealed unit to some degree. I'll have to shoot this switch down the face, and this button, I think I could actually get into the body here. This here, I haven't even looked. Maybe on the back side, I don't know. Maybe I'll just shoot the whole thing and wish it good luck that something somewhere will happen. On the power board, I did not tear it out of there. It wouldn't take but to remove those two screws. But realistically, there's not much on it or underneath it. So I may do it since I'm this far into it. But I'm anticipating nothing major to be wrong with it. This is the capacitor that they put in there for the flash. As you can see, it's 300 volt, 270 microfarad, and it is a Rubicon. I checked it, and it's pretty much on the money. It's good enough for government work. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I think it was around 280 off of my cheap Chinese meter. So again, not going to stress. Not only that, I don't have a 300 volt capacitor. I have another flash capacitor, but it's a lot bigger than this, so we will leave that in there. The capacitor that is questionable, that's reading, what did I say, 109 microfarads, is the center one. This is a 10 volt aluminum electrolytic. Size comparison, next to it I have a 16 volt. That's my smallest size that I have. And then over here I have a 25 volt. And like I said, for size comparison, you could see that the 16 has a lot smaller footprint than the 10 that's in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 25 volt in there. I think what I'm going to try to do first is actually try to remove this properly with the heat gun and see if that happens. If not, then I'll go ahead and cut it off and go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some flux, and I apologize that I will probably be in your way, and I'm going to wet the areas here, try to get the flux in there to help seep down underneath, so when I bring the heat gun in, it could help. And I apologize that my hand was in the way. It's kind of hard to do when I don't have a overhead flyover camera. So there you can see that I've got it all wet with flux. That's the flux that I'm using. I don't have syringe flux yet. That was some of the stuff that I did buy, of course. It'll be a while before it gets here, and this project will be over and done with by then. So we'll make do with what I have in the interim. For the heat gun, we'll turn it on. The best I could find paste flux will melt at around 183 degrees. I'm going to bump it up to about 185. And for displacement of the air, I'm going to go about 40%. For my tip, I've got the smallest one I have. For safety, I went ahead and put this on a piece of wood. Not necessarily safety, but I guess so it don't burn the towel that I have on my workbench. I moved the camera angle a little bit. Hopefully you could see it a little bit more than just the back of my hand or something. So just remember that when you're dealing with this heat gun, or a heat gun, that it will be very, very hot. Which means the board will be hot, the components will be hot, everything you're dealing with will be hot. So just take heed to that. Well, as you can see, I was unsuccessful with the heat gun. So I'm going to let this cool down and then I'll just cut that off. It broke free a little bit, but I don't think it was necessarily at the trace. I believe it was more the wires pulling out of the capacitor. And speaking of wires, I did break one. So I will need to solder that on. With that heat, you have to be really careful because everything heats up. Your tools, the board, all the components on the board. I've watched dozens of videos and see where everybody's successful. I haven't been very successful removing components with the heat gun. I have been very successful at tearing things up with the heat gun. Well, I didn't have to wait very long. I probably spent more time turning the camera and the microphone off than I did waiting for this thing to cool down. So now we will just simply see how successful I am at just nipping that off and hopefully not taking the traces like I've been successful at doing. Just like that. Well, that was successful. I was able to pull that off without removing those two pads, which you could clearly see are here. So I'll clean this up. I'll go ahead and kill the camera. I'll clean that up. And then I'll go ahead and just solder that on. And solder that wire back on and clean things up, and we'll go from there. As you see, I've got this all cleaned up, and the solder pads, I re-wet them. And like most of your electrolytic capacitors, these ones do have a polarity, and you want to make sure you observe polarity. As you can see here, these have one side of them colored, and that represents the negative. The board here does have a positive, as well as it has the marking here. So make sure you get that all lined up. I have the flash board all reassembled, fuse soldered back in, terminal soldered back in, double checked my work, cleaned it all up. Got the wire soldered back into place. Kind of excited. I hope this works out. So the next thing to do is I need to get my contact cleaner and clean this board up. Alright, you can see right there on those 3 pads. So I'll clean that up. I'll shoot that switch. And I'll clean that switch. And I'll clean this switch. I had a conversation with one of my co-subs in reference to this fiberglass brush, and he wanted to know if they worked out well. I bought this brush when they first came out. I don't remember how long that's been. What, early 90s maybe? And the brush is fiberglass, and which means you got to be careful of the bristles. You can get those in your skin, and it does hurt. You can buy this brush on eBay. You might be able to find a Radio Shack version, but you should also find other versions. Just look for fiberglass brush. So the principle behind this is that way you don't take something hard if you don't need hard, or you take a wheel or a grinding stone or something. You just need to knock off the oxidation, and you just take this brush as such. Now I know at your point of view you probably can't see the benefits of that, and I very seriously doubt there was any kind of benefits on this, because the contact points are just those little nipples. So let me grab this. I've adjusted my lighting, so hopefully we could all see this now. I'm going to be at an odd angle, so we'll see how good this works. But you can see those little marks right there on the center of the pad. So you just take your pen and I'm sorry, I'm trying to watch the camera, make sure I'm not in your way, and try to clean this pad so I look like I was a drunk sailor or something. So maybe that was kind of a bad example, but I think you get the point. I think it looks a little cleaned up, a little shinier. And so that's all you do. Like I said, it beats an emery board or screwdriver or something too abrasive. And take a little brush here, wipe off the debris, refocus the camera. So yes, looking underneath the magnifying glass, I can see where that was very beneficial. Even though it might not show it too well on camera, it definitely was beneficial. But I think that it can definitely be seen from your point of view. Well, I have the camera assembled partially. I think it's at a point that, with any luck, we could put a battery into it and test it. I don't think I need the viewfinder on. I don't think I need the back panel on. And I don't think I need the controls up here. The on-off switch is right here, and since it is a momentary kind of switch, it's very easy to access. What I'm expecting to see is once we get battery put into this. I'm hoping that the lens is going to retract or something like that. Maybe once I put the battery in, it'll do its thing, and once I turn it off, then the lens will retract, and that'll tell us whether or not we did it or not. And we got the battery. Okay, let's see what happens. And nothing. I have the camera, for the most part, assembled. I don't have it snapped all the way in, and the reason why is when I was piecing it together, the diopter fell off inside the diopter control. So if it does work, I'll need to tear it apart and retrieve it. If this does not work, then I'm just going to put this in the parts bin and move on to the next project. So, will it or won't it? That's the $4.27 question. Let's go ahead and stick our battery in. We'll try to keep you in frame to see what it does. So that's battery number 1. Push the power button. And I don't think I'm far enough in for the power button to hit. Well, I'm hitting it, but it's not coming to life. And so that is the story. Parts bin material it will be. Thanks for watching and coming along this failed attempt. We gave it our best. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video. See ya. Here is a addendum to this video. As I stated before that I do have another one of these cameras. Well, here it is right here. This is the actual camera that I purchased brand new when they were brand new. So I just went and dug this out. See how much easier that is to spin in comparison to, see right there, it gets stuck to that. I kept the stickers on. Sticker up here. What about the batteries, you're wondering? Well, I haven't done anything with the batteries, just went and got this camera. It's been a while since this camera has been in use, so of course it's going to come up with the calendar saying, hey, need to set it. Let's go ahead and see what it do. So we know the battery works. So there you go. Now, this will conclude the video on the attempted but yet failed repair on the Kodak Z7590, a 5 megapixel camera. Thanks again, everybody. I appreciate your support. We will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.